What are you doing? Are you filming? Is this filming? Stop it. Stop the camera.
The Isopod vlog.
I'm going to hang this up in the kitchen before Wally comes in. Let's see. I think right here will work. Yeah. Oh, duh. Where's the hammer? I'll be right back. I'll have to check that out. Where did I put it? Oh, maybe it's in the drawer. Yes. One more time. Yeah, I think that'll be good. Okay. All right, perfect. Now we'll wait and see how long it takes for Wally to notice I hung it up. I'm gonna go put the hammer away now, where it belongs this time. What are you doing? Are you filming? Is this filming? Stop it. Stop the camera. So, what's the big secret? Well, it's more of a tip than anything. And this is going to be a tip that will help you keep some of the more difficult isopods in your collection. We're talking about isopods like Porcellio, hoffmannseggi, expansus, magnificus, any of the larger Porcellio Spanish isopods. I know a lot of people struggle with these isopods. I know I did in the beginning, but there's a couple of tips that can really help you, and you don't want to lose a whole colony of 10 or 12 that you've paid maybe $100 for. This first tip you're going to find all over the place. If you go on Facebook, if you ask a vendor at a reptile show, if you talk to just about anybody that's kept these isopods or knows anything about the large, giant Spanish isopods, they're going to know this tip, and that's keep them dry. Keep a moist area and keep the rest of the enclosure dry with lots of ventilation. That's a pretty well-known fact about these isopods. But the other tip is going to help you out probably just as much, and that's use a concave piece of wood in their enclosure. And this tip you're probably not going to find many people talking about. So what is a concave piece of wood? I'll talk about that in just a second. I was lucky enough this summer to go through a park and find a huge pile of wood cut up. Now, I didn't want to take all these big logs, but fortunately the bark had fallen off of a lot of these pieces and it had curled up a little bit through the weathering. So I went ahead and stopped the car, opened the trunk, and threw a bunch of this wood into the trunk. Now, unfortunately, these were huge pieces. I had to bring them home and saw them down to more manageable pieces. Now, when you collect wood in the wild, there's a couple of ways that you can treat that wood so you don't bring in contaminants, especially into your enclosures. The first way is that you can soak this wood in a bucket for a couple of days. I myself don't like that method because you're soaking, you need a big bucket, and from soaking, then you have to bring the wood out and you have to dry it out. So that's a long process. Another way to treat that wood, and I'm very fortunate in being in one of the northern states, I can take this wood and I can put it in the garage and let it sit for 2 or 3 months. That takes care of any parasites or anything, ants, anything that's on the wood that could get into my cultures. The third method is that you can take this wood, put it on a metal sheet, throw it in your oven at about 225 to 250 for about 20 minutes to 30 minutes. Really watch that to make sure that you don't start a fireplace from your oven. That should take care of anything on your wood. So let's get back to that second tip, and that's using a concave piece of wood rather than a flat piece of wood. And why is that so important? I think with some of these Spanish isopods, they want to get up off of the substrate. Now, they need a substrate that's damp in part of their enclosure, but part of their enclosure is going to be dry as well. I think that these Spanish isopods want to get up off of that substrate. Some species of isopods just really don't care, like dairy cows. You can take a flat piece of wood, lay it on the substrate, and they'll just be as content as anything. But isopods like Porcellio spatulatus, hoffmannseggi, expansus, and magnificus really need to get up off of that substrate. Let me go ahead and show you this armadillidium granulatum that I have a perfect piece of wood for. This is just concave enough that the isopods like to get up off the ground and congregate on that piece of wood. This is a happy group of isopods in this container. I certainly know that it's frustrating bringing in a culture of isopods and not seeing them do very well. It's one thing to not see them breed, but to eventually have them all die off is a very frustrating thing in the hobby. If you're not seeing your powder blues or dairy cows or zebras or clowns not breeding or dying off, that's one thing. But to bring in some of these Spanish Porcellios, the big ones, at such a high cost, it's really humbling to lose a bunch of these isopods. And that's what I'm hoping these tips will help you avoid. And let me tell you, once you start changing a couple of things with these isopods, you'll have a ton of success. Check out these Porcellio spatulatus that we just recently received some mancae on. I'll throw the link up over here. Have you struggled with these isopods too? Leave a comment below and let me know which isopods you've had problems with and maybe that this tip will help you with. Thanks for watching. Hit the like, hit the subscribe if you haven't already, and hit that notification all, and we'll see you next week.